You are head of health and safety where?
So I work for a small company on the railway, but yeah, my role is head of health and safety. There wasn't a week that went by that there wasn't some sort of disruption, which then presented irate passengers that are very quick to call you names, threaten you, and at times get physical.
Do you experience any violence?
One of the guys I work with, we'd had some disruption, and the train had come in. It was everyone was getting out. He was dispatching the train. As he's standing there watching the train, some blokes walked up to him and just started punching him in the head because his train was late. That was it.
Wow.
It does happen. It happens far too much. I've had abuse. I've been threatened. I had people pull out knives, but never actually physical violence, which I don't know how I managed to escape that, to be honest, but just lucky, I guess.
The scale of suicide, because you hear about it all the time.
I think in my career, I've probably dealt with it far too much.
You've hit something, you've got to stop, your protocol kicks in, train stops, you're out there by yourself, and all of a sudden you shine a torch, you see a dead body there.
That's right, yeah.
Wow, that's fucking tough.
Yeah.
Luke, how you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
How's the life?
All right, mustn't grumble.
Treating you well?
Yeah, not too bad.
Is it treating you accordingly?
Probably not.
Probably not. Just like that, no. It's treating me too well.
Too well at times, yeah.
So, Luke, you are, and I'm going to let you explain, you are head of health and safety where?
So I work for a small company on the railway. We're based in a couple of different places. We've got offices in Swindon.
National Rail,
Crewe. National Rail, yeah, that's right. So we're based all over the country. We do works all across the UK, Ireland, and abroad as well. But yeah, my role is head of health and safety. I haven't always been ahead. Yeah, there's a lot of responsibility, a lot of accountability, but I've not always been there. I've been on the railway for 16 years, and I've worked my way up the ladder.
So where did it all start for you?
So it started in East Croydon.
Okay.
That's where I'm originally from. I was born in Croydon, lived there for most of my life. I joined the railway in October 2006. It was meant to be a stopgap. It was never meant to be my career.
And what did you start off as? Did you ticket tout or what was it?
Dispatch staff.
Dispatch staff,
yeah.
okay.
So doing the customer services, answering questions, dispatching the trains, make sure people get on and off safely.
Okay, so for example, when you walk into like your Waterloos and your Paddingtons, you got your information desks.
Yep.
You work behind there. Is that
so
safe to say?
Little office.
They're thereabouts.
Yeah, that's it, yeah. And then when the train comes in, everyone gets off, you make sure it's okay, and you dispatch the train and get rid of it as safely and as quickly as you can.
How hectic are the trains in the UK?
So when I started, I worked at one of the busiest locations in the UK. We were typically getting about, on average, 70,000 people a day.
70,000 people a day on and off the trains.
Yeah, that's the peaks, the morning and evening. On a Saturday, it's peak all day. It's just busy from beginning to the end. And yeah, it's hectic at times. And that's when things are going well.
That's when, exactly.
That's when everything is working. During a rush hour, the station I was at, you would typically get 80 trains through that station every hour. So that's one.
80 trains an hour?
Yeah.
Wow, 70,000 people, 80 trains an hour. You're talking about some very probably unhappy people, no?
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes. Including the staff.
Including the staff.
Yeah.
How did you sort of carry on in that career? So it was a stopgap. Did you just enjoy the people? Did you enjoy the trains? How did you sort of come about making a career for yourself when it was just a stopgap?
A bit of both. It was a bit of those things, but I was also identified fairly quickly because I had a degree that I could actually probably climb up the ladder fairly
swiftly. What you got a degree in? Come on, Luke, come on.
Completely unrelated. Egyptology and ancient history.
Wow, Egyptology. You should be on the fucking pyramids, Luke. You know,
completely unrelated. Yeah, I had a different plan for my life, and it just didn't quite pan out.
But that degree helps in any line of work, right? It's what have you got a degree in? You're like, don't worry, I've just got a degree. Here you go.
It did. Well, to be fair, the skills that it gave me were to do things like writing reports and things, and it allowed me to stand out amongst my peers. So when I went for jobs, I was able to interview better. I suppose I could convey myself better. So I was able to stand out in that respect. But I identified the fact that I could probably climb up the ladder maybe a bit quicker.
Okay.
So I thought, well, actually, it's not a bad choice. There's a lot you can do on the railway. It's one of the things about the industry. There are so many jobs, so many different roles you can take on.
Really?
Yeah, there's loads. And I like that. I'm the sort of person that I don't like being in the same thing too long. I've got itchy feet. I'm always moving.
Like myself.
Yeah, exactly. And it appealed to me in that sense. So I thought, well, I'll stick it out and see how it goes. And 16 years later, it's doing pretty well.
So you work in the offices, you work your way up.
Yeah.
Talk to me about the career path. If anyone was interested in getting into the National Rail or into the railway, what's the career path that you took? So you went into the offices and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, sure. So I started on the platforms.
So the platforms, you're there when the people are getting off and lots of complaints, I suppose?
Every day, there wasn't a week that went by that there wasn't some sort of disruption, which then presented irate passengers that are very quick to call you names, threaten you, and at times get physical.
Yeah, as soon as they open that door and they're late and you're on that platform, they make a beeline to you, right?
That's it. Absolutely. You got the high visibility clothing on, and they just want to have a crack at someone, and I'm there. There we go. It's me and my friends.
Here we go.
That's it.
Tin hat on.
Yeah, get ready.
Body armour on, here we go.
Get ready for it. And it's coming. You can just sense the change in the atmosphere. As soon as something occurs, you're like, oh no, what's happened now?
Yeah, here we go.
And the dread and the stress levels just increase.
Okay, and I can imagine,
That's the things that people don't necessarily get. I'm not coming to the station to make your life difficult.
No.
When you're on my station, as politely as possible, I want you to come and go ASAP. I don't want you here any longer than you need to be.
Yeah.
I just want to get you away as quick as possible.
A to B, off you go, do what you need to do.
That's it, exactly. Yeah. So when things go wrong, you do get a little bit nervous, a little bit anxious, and you can tell with your experience how long these things are going to carry on for. If it's a train has failed, signal fail, or whatever it might be, it gives you a rough idea of where it is and how long it's going to carry on for. So that was where I started, and then through that, I moved to another station, got a different job, a little bit more responsibility as a supervisor. Did different tasks. I was able to attach and detach trains, or walk on the track and that sort of thing. And then from there, I went into management.
So is it true when you say you walk on the rails, is it true if you touch a certain one, your hair will go and you're like, is it true?
Yeah, so in the south, we have what we call third rail. So you've got three rail. The one that sits slightly higher, that's the power.
Okay, so that's the one you should run up to and put your tongue on.
That's it. See what happens.
Do not do that. Because a lot of as youngsters, as you grow up, you're at the bridges. You're out all the time as a youngsters, and your kids are running across the railways, and we go on to that later. But there was always that if you touch one of them, you're gonna die, and that's true, right?
It does. Yeah, it can certainly at least give you a nasty burn. And what it does is if you were to grab the rail, it basically contracts the muscles in your hands and your arm. You won't be able to let go. So you just get the voltage going straight through you, and that's game over. I did see that with a dog once. A dog, as it went across the line, its tail got zapped. And as it turned around, it bit the rail. And of course, it couldn't let go. And we had to get everything shut off. And pretty grim affairs. Not much you can do, to be honest. You can't put yourself at risk to just
don't mess around on the rails.
No, I tell my son that all the time. Yeah, that's right.
So you go from that to the trains. That's pretty cool though. Like you said, there's a difference in being on the platform and all of a sudden jumping down, getting your hands dirty, changing the trains, and then where'd you go from there?
Yeah, so then I became a station manager. So I kind of switched allegiances to a lot of staff, become management, and then, oh God, no, it's changed. He's a different person. And I quite enjoyed that. That was a more people-orientated type of role. I'd kind of left the operational side a bit, and I was now managing the staff, making sure they're okay. But I always knew from when I took that job, it was never going to be the job that I'd stay in, because I liked being operational. So I was always looking for the road back. And then I eventually took a job as what we called a competency manager. So if you were dispatch staff, if you were a conductor, shunter driver, they're all safety critical roles. And within that, they all require constant management on how they perform.
Yep.
So my job would be go and test them. I'd go and watch what they're doing, ask them questions. I wasn't particularly popular. I was
I can imagine that you over their shoulder.
That's it. I'd turn up and people just disappear. But I enjoyed it. I was always around and just traveling from different locations and doing a lot of different stuff. And it was from that kind of got me interested in health and safety. But there were other aspects of that job that put me at the forefront of dealing with operational incidents. So if that was a driver's accidentally driven through a red light, or he's opened the wrong doors on the wrong side, or fatalities, it was something that me and the guys and the women that I worked with, we would often be the first ones on scene to liaise with our company and Network Rail to tell them what was going on. And that introduced me into a whole different world of issues and challenges that I had to sort of navigate.
Wow. So you got to the point where you spent basically your whole day just looking at situations that transpired, whether, like you said, opening up a door on the wrong side, going through a red light, I imagine suicides on the platform,
Many,
you name it. So that's, I'm just thinking that for a day's work, how all you're doing is dealing with negativity on that part.
Yeah, but that was part and parcel of the railway, because even from when I looked at the first job, when you're dealing with disruption, it was just constant negativity.
When you say disruption, what's it on the spectrum? So you got, I suppose, disruption from people committing suicide to what?
To a train breaking down.
To a train breaking down.
Yeah, and if it's stuck on the wrong location, if it's stuck on a junction, it means other trains can't get through. So it just backs everything up. There's nothing.
Complete nightmare.
Nothing. We've had landslides, flooding, all sorts. Yeah.
So you're there basically to pick up the pieces.
Try to, yeah.
And you talk about from when you went first into office. It was 2006, you say?
So I started on the railway 2006.
How much did it change to where it is now? Because not from my point of view, I think the trains have become less reliable from back in the day when I was a kid. I used to jump on the train, a bit like a bus. I knew that they would get me from A to B pretty quick. I could rely on the timings with my friends. It wasn't the case we had mobile phones and we could go, oh, I'm running late. It's like, they knew that the train would normally be on time. And I say lately, I say the last sort of 5-6 years, even more than that, probably the last decade. I don't think people can rely on the trains as much as they did back in the day. Is that true, or is that just my point of view?
I think there's perception that might be. I think the difference is, I remember British Rail, the difference is between sort of BR days and now, there is a bigger demand for use of trains, and we run more trains. So if you went back 40 years to British Rail running through something like East Croydon to now, the amount of trains going through that is completely different. It's more.
Okay.
So what you have is, let's say 40 years ago a train fails, it doesn't impact as many services. If it fails now in the same location, the amount of service it impacts is
but have they kept up with the infrastructure, or is the infrastructure just the same? It's all well and good having more trains, but surely the infrastructure should match that as it goes through, but it clearly doesn't, right? Yeah,
there are struggles with the infrastructure. I mean, we still have Victorian equipment in places, but there's a real reason for that. There's a very real reason for that, and the reason is post World War II, we didn't have the money to replace the railway infrastructure, which was left largely intact. We didn't really need to replace it. It was still working and operational post World War II. We had no money to replace it, so we allowed steam trains to keep running. On the continent, it was different. France was completely destroyed. Germany was completely destroyed. They had to rebuild everything from scratch. Hence the reason why they have a better network and a more reliable network and a more modern one. So they're two differences.
Ah, yes, because when I go to Switzerland or wherever it may be, it's like seamless.
Very different.
Even France, you mentioned France going into going into Paris. It's very different.
I mean, they've had diesel trains since I think the late 40s. We only got diesel trains I think in the mid 60s, sort of thing. So it's a very different network because of how the network survived during World War II.
And
plus, we have quite a big infrastructure condensed into a smaller area.
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
So when one junction fails, it affects multiple lines. Whereas in France, it's different.
So what about a restructure? Is that will that create more chaos and more and more angry individuals if they started doing that?
Probably. I mean, you have to maintain the infrastructure. It's got to be maintained, and the reason why Britain
is it not outdated though?
Yeah, in places it is, but they do replace it and they replenish it. I mean, even now we've got brand new signalling going in, equipment all over the country. It's the best equipment you can find.
Right.
And it does exactly what you need it to do. It's very good equipment, it lasts longer, and it's reliable. It takes time to replace stuff.
Sure.
It takes a lot of money, and of course it disrupts the service, and people will laughingly say we have the best rail replacement bus service in the world. and we probably do.
So I don't need to mention that anymore. That was my next. It's just true, isn't it?
It is, but for good reason. And I understand the frustration, but also I'd add to that, the reason we have one of the safest networks in the world is because we do so much maintenance, we do so much renewals. We go out, we replace bits of track.
So we've got one of the safest.
Oh, really? Very safe network, very safe network.
Really?
Doesn't mean we don't have things
of course,
occur,
of course.
But we have a safe network. We're a good industry, and I think in the 16 years you've seen it get better and better, where when something happens, we learn. We take that forward to try and make sure it doesn't happen again. And when something happens on a certain area, because obviously we have lots of different operators in the UK, we share that information around so that other people in other parts of the country understand what's going on and they can try and implement it well. And we have, the regulator, the ORR, is very good at making sure that operators and the infrastructure managers like Network Rail do what they need to do. I'm confident in the infrastructure. It is a safe network. You see it every day.
So it's getting better. Is that what you're trying to say?
It's always getting better, I guess. You're always going to have that sort of, it's like the England football team, up and down.
Yeah, do you know what? It sums up. That's quite a nice sum up, actually, mate. But dealing with stuff on a day-to-day basis, how are you guys on demand? Are you? How's the staffing there? Is it?
It's difficult to answer because I can't. I suppose I can't speak for everybody, but I mean, my experiences would be that as technology has improved, you don't necessarily need the human input that we had before. So when I started, a lot of our trains, if they were 10 coaches or 12 coaches, they would always have a conductor on board.
Yeah.
Whereas now you have certain locations, you just don't need conductors because the driver can self-dispatch. He's got monitors, he can see the whole length of the train and dispatch himself quite safely. In fact, I would argue in some ways safer. Well, that's probably quite controversial. But yeah, I think as technology has improved, you probably need less people to do certain things, but it doesn't change the fact that when it comes to doing the maintenance, you still need boots on the ground to go and do that work. You're not going to get a drone in to do a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, no, it seems when something does go wrong with the rail, it seems like that you're in there and it's sorted straight away. It's the top priority. You get it done, and you're back on the tracks before you know it. That's the one thing that I will say. That is super positive. It's not a case of we're going to sit here and it's going to take time. We're undermanned. It's a case of right, this is the problem. Let's find a solution. Let's do it now.
Yeah.
And what is, because there's a lot of stress, I would say, in your jobs, especially when you just spoke about being on the platforms and you're basically meeting people who've had a bad morning. They're late for work. They need to vent on someone, they vent on you, they vent on the staff, because there's never really a nice conversation that goes on, let's be honest. And then no one comes up to you and goes, oh, that was a bloody good journey, thank you so much. It's everyone vents their problems and their anger and stress onto you guys. How does that, how do you cope with that as an individual or as a team or as an organisation? It sounds like it can be a very stressful job, and you're almost putting yourself in the firing line. Even train drivers, they're taking you from A to B. They're getting you to work. They're getting you home. But the moment something small goes wrong, then your whole world is going to descend with probably about 10, 15, 100 disgruntled people. How do you cope with that?
Sometimes it depends on who you're working with. When you've got the right crew with you, you kind of laugh your way through it. And I think certainly,
smart, a bit of humour in the face of adversity.
Sometimes a bit of dark humour comes in. When you're dealing with certainly highly stressful situations, there is dark humour to just get you through it, to push you through it. And you rely on each other. There have definitely been moments in the past where 1 minute you're on a platform, the next minute you're surrounded by 20 or 30 people, want to ask questions, they want to have a go. And I've called over and said, someone come over and just give me a hand. And before you know it, you got someone over and you feel a lot better. You rely on each other to be there, to support each other. And at the end of it, when it all quietens down, you take those quiet moments to just sit down, have a breather, maybe have a cup of tea and just try and process what you've been through. Although
the hell has just happened?
That's right. And think, did that really just occur? It did. Right, okay. And you try and process those thoughts as best you can. Although I always found, for me personally, and I think the railway, certainly years ago, because it was such a male-dominated industry, there was always that inward reflection. You wouldn't necessarily talk about your feelings. You would just do it internally, and which isn't necessarily the best way.
That's,
but you rely
countrywide, really, isn't it? I think that's the sort of, especially in the UK, that's the ethos, isn't it? It's like us men, we just get on with things, keep your mouth shut, and we're bottle it up, and we'll be fine. And all of a sudden, that bottle explodes, and it's like, maybe I should have handled that a bit different.
Absolutely, and it's taken me a long time to learn that, and it's taken numerous experiences to teach me that lesson before I really started to get that, But certainly, I mean, when you're dealing with that, the people you work with is essential. If you've got the odd bloke that you work with as a bit of, a bit of an out, a bit of a knob,
bit of a nightmare.
You're like that.
Bit of a
I didn't want to say it. That's it. And you think, oh man, well, I get stuck with this guy. Yeah, that can make things a little bit hard because sometimes you get people that just they can't deal with the pressure, and then you have to look out for them as well, which makes things twice as hard.
Yeah, but it does.
Twice as hard.
And what's the percentage of women to men, male to female?
It's definitely improved. I couldn't give you the exact numbers, but I remember when I started, I think there was one female driver. It has improved. There are a lot more women. You typically, when I started, the women were either ticket office staff, office admin staff. You might get some on the platforms. Certainly no drivers.
Yeah.
But now, 16 years later, it's completely different. They do every role. I did work for a company previously. I spent a bit of time on the underground. And we would put out hundreds of guys every night. Out of the hundreds of guys, there was only 3 women that were engineers, track engineers. And that was going back about sort of 5 or 6 years ago. But that's changing. You get more and more women come in, and they add a different value. They add a different perspective to everything, and it's refreshing. To be
women are
around
good at defusing situations. You get off a train and you're like, and you see a woman. As a man, you're like, just get on with my day. But if I see someone standing there, the old conductor standing there, and he's got a bit of a strut on him, then you're going to make a beeline for yourself ultimately, just by being male on male. You know what? It's just male aggression on male aggression,
it is.
And we think that's okay. Well, when you jump off a train, and again, you have that female presence, it's just more calming, isn't it? More.
It is.
It's definitely defusing. That's what I would say.
It does, and there's been a couple of occasions where I was glad to have a woman on board because we had a certain situation where one of the stations I worked at, a lady had turned up with her 2 daughters, and she was clearly in a state of distress. And when I got called over, this was when I was a supervisor, I got called over to go and sort of help out. When I walked into the room where the lady was, if looks could kill, I would have dropped dead there and then. And she clearly didn't want any men near her. She was on the verge of panicking. She was really in a bad place. But luckily we had a female colleague. She came over and completely the atmosphere in that room changed. We found out later on that the lady had been a victim of domestic abuse. She was convinced that her husband was trying to poison her and her kids, hence the reason why she hated kids, hated men, you know what I mean? Yeah. So I completely understood why me being there was a threat to her. I got it. So I was just glad that I had someone on board that could.
And you read the situation straight away. You're like, I've seen that look before. I'm getting out of it.
All those exes.
But it's it's glad. It's good to hear that though, because they do, like you said, and you mentioned it, they bring a different dynamic. And if you can bring multiple facets to any organisation, it's going to benefit it massively.
Yeah, absolutely.
Welcome to my Mind Over Muscle Festival, hosted by myself, Ant Middleton. You're in trouble. Now, once you go through these gates, there's no going back. Let's do this. With 250 acres to play with and to fill, come along, fill it up, and come play with Team Ant. My Mind Over Muscle Festival, hosted by myself, Ant Middleton, is open to all. Come along, face your fears, and unlock your true potential. This festival is open to all abilities. It will be action-packed, fear-defying, and a coming together of positive, like-minded people, encapsulated with the main ingredient, fun.
But also for you, did you and for women, do you experience any violence on platforms and in your job? I could only imagine that you do, right?
Mm-hmm. I've never had it personally. I've been threatened. Yeah. I've been in situations where someone...
Oh, that's good. In 16 years, no one's given you a thump.
No. I had
that's good.
friends that have had it too. One of the guys I work with, we'd had some disruption and the train had come in. It was everyone was getting out. He was dispatching the train. As he's standing there watching the train, some blokes walked up to him and just started punching him in the head because his train was late. That was it.
Wow.
It does happen. It happens far too much. I've had abuse. I've been threatened. I had people pull out knives, but never actually physical violence. Which I don't know how I managed to escape that, to be honest. But just lucky, I guess. But it's a common occurrence.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, it's common.
It's a common occurrence.
People just so enraged. Think that it's your fault that you've made the train late or something's happened on the line that's caused a delay and you're getting it.
Yeah, they take it personally. It's as if I've gotten up in that morning to ruin their day. I've got better things to do than cause disruption. They do take it personally, especially I used to find working in and around London, especially during the sort of morning peak, people are very determined to get where they want to get to.
Yeah.
And if you're in the way, God help you.
Yeah, they just mow you down.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. They go straight through. I remember one day being at a station. This guy had come running down this slope. He clattered into this old lady to get on his train. Didn't stop. Got on the train. It was only afterwards we realised what had happened, and she'd been knocked flying. She'd broken her hip.
What? And he just carried on.
She went.
So people are that desperate or are that keen to get from A to B that they just go through anything and anyone.
Yeah, but what's even
if that
more
was on the
irritating-
street and she fell, I'd like to think that gentleman would go, "Oh, I'm sorry."
Absolutely, that's
But
the human
because
thing
he's got
to
a
do.
train to catch, he's like, almost, "Fuck you! I've got a train to catch. I need to be here at this time.
Yep.
I'm going. I'm off."
That's it. Your fault. You're in my way. Yeah, exactly. But the irritation is if you'd waited, there's another train right behind taking you to the same place. It's minutes. It's like 3 or 4 minutes.
Wow.
Don't need to do that. Just wait. Just be patient.
So you see, and again, just from what we just discussed, you see sort of like the worst of humanity,
Sometimes,
really.
yeah, sometimes,
Like I said, no one jumps off a train and goes, "Oh, thank you so much.
Rarely,
You got me here on time." But they're always, they're always rushed to get from A to B. They need to get a certain meeting, a certain lunch, whatever it may be, and they will not stop for anything that gets in their way.
It does happen. Yeah.
Because people sort of lose their manners, don't they? When they're rushed and they're stressed and they feel like they're going to be late, because no one likes to be late. Let's be honest. It does. It's almost like your manners go out the window. Your respect goes out the window. It's like I've seen it, and I'm probably guilty of it as well because I'm super polite. I come from a culture in France. I was brought up in France where you walk past someone, you tip your hat. You say hello, whatever it may be. But when I was on the underground or on a train, it'd be like, as soon as that door opened, get off, beat the rush, the foot rush, get through the gate, and then get straight to my next train before I missed it. But then I'd probably have 10, 20 minutes anyway of spare time before I got there. But I just needed to get there to make sure that I've got that spare time, and then I relax. But you sort of go into a bit of a demonic sort of mindset, don't you?
It's like tunnel vision.
Yes,
it
is.
Yeah, and that's it.
And that's all you see, right?
Yeah, sometimes you do. I mean, it's not all like that. You do see the good in people. There have been instances where people will collapse on a platform. He's had a heart attack, and there's a doctor, there's a nurse, and they don't hesitate to come over, and they will come and help, and they will stay there until the ambulance comes along and takes them away. There's a lot of good that goes on, but you just see those instances where people are incredibly selfish, and they want to get somewhere.
Selfish, that's the one.
And they just don't care what happens. And of course, if their train is delayed, you're going to get it. You're the one that's going to bear the brunt of whatever they want to deliver, and I have to take it because I'm wearing a high vis. It's that
take that high vis off. So that's just a mere drop in the ocean what you have to deal with. Let's go on to the scale of suicide because you hear about it all the time. Trains being delayed because of people jumping in front of them, people jumping off bridges, people, like you said, opening doors, jumping out, whatever it may be, even though the doors are locked, etc. But the wind, just how often do you deal with that issue, and how severe is it, if you're being honest?
I think in my career, I've probably dealt with it far too much in one capacity or another. What tends to happen is if there's a fatality that impacts the services, even if it's not at your location, you get to learn about it, you understand what the implications are, and then you prepare your answers for the passengers. But on the occasion where it happens at your station, the dynamic and the atmosphere is completely different because you've now introduced the fact that someone I know or someone I work with is now having to deal with that, or having to deal with the fact they might have witnessed that. You've also got the impacts it has on the train crew. And I've had drivers convinced that they've just killed someone, and you haven't. It's not your fault.
So they've taken it personally.
And that's happened a couple of times, and it's heartbreaking to watch that.
That's a tough gig because some people don't know how to take death. They don't know how to take someone committing suicide or whatever it is, but because it's happened to them in front of them, they take it personally. Soldiers are the same.
Yeah.
If someone gets blown up on a battlefield, it's like that. I should have trod on that ID. I should have been there. Why do you think they take it personally?
I guess it's just in that moment, it's some kind of way of processing.
Yes,
I think it is. It is. Yeah, and that's the only way I can think about it. And the problem is that in that moment, you've got a driver that does need to perform a certain function. He's got to do something within that cab. He's got to alert, the signalman. He's got to make sure the train is safe.
So it almost becomes personal, right? It's like it's happened here. I've got to now deal with this personally. I've got to. I'm at the forefront of, disseminating this information. I'm at the forefront of making sure that the people in the train, are safe. They know what's going on.
That's right.
There's a lot of responsibility there for example, a train driver or for a platform worker, whatever it may be. Wow.
Yeah, because like you say, you're absolutely right. You've now got to put that aside and deal with the issue. People need looking after. We need to deal with the train. There might be people on the platforms that have seen it. We need to look after them, make sure they're okay. And the driver, if he's functioning, and most of the time they are, they can do that, and they can work through it, and their training kicks in. Most drivers I've ever dealt with on a fatality exemplify professionalism. They do it incredibly well. Even there have been occasions where it's at night and you're not entirely sure what you've hit, and they have to get out the cab, they have to walk back the line to see what it is, and then they find what it is. They're on their own in the middle of nowhere sometimes. The only person they've got is themselves.
So you don't think about that. At night, you've hit something, you've got to stop, your protocol kicks in, train stops, you're out there by yourself, and all of a sudden you shine a torch, you see a dead body there.
That's right,
Wow, that's fucking tough.
Yeah. And it's a dangerous network at the best of times. There you are walking the track at night, and now you've just come across that. It just ramps up the pressure straight away. Yeah,
because when you don't see that, or you don't hear of that side of things, normally it's just, they've jumped on, the police are there, they've covered up the body. But wow, on the flip side, if there is a flip side, it's being by yourself, having to take all that responsibility and all that pressure on yourself to keep the railway fucking moving,
to keep it going, to get it back up started and get it going again.
That's probably and there's no easy way to say that, but that's probably the main priority of the services. No matter what happens, we need to keep it going, because even though we've lost a life here, we've got the safety of hundreds of others in these cabs back here.
Absolutely, and the practicality is you do run a service. We've got to run a service. We'll deal with it,
and that's the priority, right? Make sure it runs on time and as efficiently as possible, right?
In that circumstance, the priority is to make sure that what's just happened is dealt with properly. That the problem with suicides, or the issue with suicides, is depending on what happens and where the body is, will determine often how quickly you can get the line back up and running. If somebody gets hit by a train at 30, it's very different if they get hit by a train doing 90. That's the differences. So being able to reopen the line is dependent on that. The police have to turn up. They have to be happy that it's not, it is a suicide. They have to,
it's not, there's no ill intent there.
That's right. So there's a lot to consider, but that's the priority. We deal with that. We deal with the staff. We deal with the passengers. Once we're happy, then we can start looking at reopening the line. That's the way it works. This is the priority, dealing with the suicide, and then we'll reopen the line when we can. But
and then the aftermath of that, you've had what? Sorry, Luke?
I've had it where I remember once we had a fatality in the morning. It was a Saturday, and by early afternoon it was clearing, and then we had another one.
No.
And you get to a point, you're just tired, you're knackered, because it's just stress and stress, and two in one day, and that just takes a toll on you. It really does. It's tiring, and it's aggravating, and it's difficult, and how you process that information.
Well, that's what I said, the aftermath of that, because then I suppose statements, they're all stressful. You just want to get on with your life. You just want to get on with things, and then I suppose the aftermath of it, is there a sort of routine that you guys go through? Whether it's mental health checks, statement, advice, whatever it may be. Is there an organisation that helps drivers, platform workers, whatever it may be, to deal with that situation?
Yeah, something I think the railway have consistently done well, and it's improved over the years, is having what they call employee assistant programs. So
good.
It is a confidential line, and you can talk to them about anything you want. If you've got financial problems or personal problems, or if you've just dealt with a fatality, you can call them up and you can speak to somebody. You can tell them anything you want, and you can have
that's in place.
Yeah,
solidly in place.
It's all there, and I've never worked with a manager that didn't. If it was a Saturday evening and we'd had a fatality, the manager will be there. They'll come.
Oh, that's really reassuring.
They'll turn
really
up.
Reassuring.
Yeah. And they'll be there until the service is right, and then they'll take you aside. Are you all right? Do you need anything? Do you want whatever? And they're great at that. I've never had an issue with the railway not looking at it. In fact, I would say over 16 years, it just gets better and better and better, and it's more openly talked about. I would say the only problem was years ago, it was just getting people to use the service, convincing men, do you know what? Go and have a phone call. It's all right.
Yeah, that's the taboo, okay. Right? It's that's the stigma behind
Big
it. It's
taboo.
like pick up that phone. It's like, what am I supposed to say?
And I think that's what it is. It's that genuine, like, well, how do I verbalise what I'm thinking?
That's why it's so good to hear, because you hear of other organisations with them, and there's something there, but there's not really anything there. You know, it's a case of, I suppose, dealing with suicides on a super regular basis, right? It's not uncommon. That service is needed more than most.
Yeah.
So it's good to know that that's there, but it should be there with any organisation, really. I think the mental health in the UK in general, it's dealt with poorly. There's not enough services there, but it's great to know, and it's probably one of the first discussions that I've had where you've gone, no, they're there for us. It actually really works. It's really good, which is really refreshing to hear, because being a mental health advocate myself, it's like we can always do more, but sometimes the it's there, but people just don't use it, right?
Yeah, and that's the difficulty with the railway. It is such, even now, it's still massively male dominated, and just convincing someone to go and have a chat, be vulnerable. Show your emotions. It doesn't make you any less of a man.
No.
If anything, it probably makes you more of a man to be in touch with that.
100%. Do you know what? It's so true, because if you'd have told me that 10 years ago, I'd have laughed in your face.
I would have done the same.
I would have been like that. But, having seen what the devastating effect that of soldiers, of workers, whatever it may be, and realising that I was that close to being there as well. But I did end up talking without even realising it, talking with my mates in the military, talking with my wife, that little bit of ventilation that you have, when you're chewing your missus' ear off. But that's a form of therapy. That's a form of, you're venting your day's activities to her. Same with the family, same with my colleagues. It helps massively, right?
Yeah, gotcha.
But you don't even realise you're talking, but you're talking, right? It's great to hear. So with yourself though, Luke, how have you managed the 16 years with what you've seen? What's your coping mechanism of a horrendous day? Let's say you've been shouted at, you've been screamed at, you've been threatened, you've dealt with a suicide, you've dealt with a fatality. What's your go-to sort of unwind?
It's changed over the years. It's gone from being probably quite toxic to being far more positive.
Toxic drinking?
Yeah, a little bit. Or just simply not talking about it, just simply bottling up and thinking, I'll deal with it, it's fine, it's not going to be an issue. And then years later, it does come out. It comes out in various guises. It comes out, I flashbacks, I have nightmares.
The cap pops, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, And then
when you least expect it, that's thing,
right. Yeah, or when you've got other pressures going on and it will just suddenly come out. And I was definitely a sheep in that. I was definitely a follower of that sort of prescribed method of just internalise everything. That's, I'm a man, I don't really talk about this stuff.
Yeah.
Completely toxic, and it made me a very
toxic
cold
man.
very cold and distant from people that I shouldn't have been cold and distant to. Maybe very difficult to be around, but it changed. I had a friend that I worked with on the railway, and he was a mate of mine who took his own life, and that was very difficult to deal with. It's been over a decade, and it still cuts me deep. But from that moment on, I realised I need to sort of process stuff in a different way, because he clearly wasn't, and it really impacted him, and it impacted all of us when we found out he had died. He was part of the railway family, and he was a mate. He wasn't just a bloke I worked with, he was a good mate. And
it's one of those, I suppose, and I completely sympathise with you, where it's one of those where, I'm heading down that road. I could potentially be where he is if, and all that's going to do is not carry on his legacy. It's just going to bury it even deeper. It's like you've got to learn from people, and you've got to learn from their mistakes. That's what life is all about, right? It's looking at situations and going, right, listen, that could be me if I don't sort myself out. So it's really, really tough, and it's really, really horrendous. And have you seen people's, over the 16 years of doing it, have you seen a change in that where people's attitudes have changed? Have you seen a change in the general public from mental health, from health and safety. I suppose those 16 health and safety's come a long way. Mental health, not so much. It's only been the last couple of years where we've really started to talk about it. It's got a long way to go, as we know. But have you seen a drastic change in those 16 years, just in people's demeanours and people's attitudes, how people treat each other?
Yeah.
Has there been a drastic change in that? Because I think that people are so selfish nowadays, so self-concerned and so self-importance that that whole sense of community, because it was, the trainers, look at the old, get on a train station, you have your fat conductor and, that sense of community, Postman Pat, it's that sense of community, it's like firemen, whatever, there's always that sense of community with the railways, the fire service, the police, there was, but it seems, we seem to be getting more and more distant as a community. And do you think that's a change of personality, change of attitude, or just the change of how we do things nowadays?
I think society in many ways is becoming more and more, individuals are becoming more self-absorbed.
Yes.
But I do think when I think back to COVID and all that was going on then, you had this really strange situation that nobody had ever really lived through. And what I found, and a lot of people I was working with, was actually, although I couldn't go and physically meet you, we were now actively finding the time to do Zoom calls, to do WhatsApp calls or whatever, to chat to each other and spend more time talking to each other, because one, I can't physically be around you, but I found myself talking to more people, and I found myself talking to my neighbours more. I found myself offering to help people out more, and being more available. So I think there was a change through COVID. As challenging as it was, there were a lot of positive changes. My only query would be, or my only worry, was that change, as things have gone back to normality, that change is starting to go back and it's starting to disappear again. And it's a shame. I mean, I live in a house. I've got neighbours either side of me, and I've always made it a business to talk to them. I don't have to be best mates, but I just want to get to know them.
Yeah.
Just say hello. And there's people in my road.
You're living with them ultimately. They're next door.
Exactly. You want to get to know people you're next door to. And I think that's the sort of changes that people need to just simply carry on. Just have a chat with someone. Just say hello. And sometimes it's that conversation that can really be the difference between someone having a good day and having a crap day.
And do you notice that from when you first started of having conversations with people to where you are? I know you're probably less involved with people, but where you're at now, have you seen a drastic change in that, where people get off and you probably would have a nice conversation with them? You probably would, they probably ask you how your day's been, and they would have a little bit of time to, not get from A to B, where they probably chew your ear off in a positive way. Has there been a change in that? Or
there has to some degree. Again, I guess COVID made people a little bit more wary of being around people they don't know. They weren't going to stop and have a chat with someone they didn't really know. But in general, still, even now, you go out and about, and I smile at people. And when I live in Cheshire currently, and I find people up in the north can be so friendly and so open. They'll just say hello to you as you walk down the streets. A little bit different to London. London's not like that. It's just got blinkered and they just
head down. It's like
that's it. Yeah. That's it. No, that hasn't changed. If anything, I've lived in Cheshire now since 2018, and that's carried all the way through. People are pretty friendly. They're pretty happy to have a chat and ask you about you. I was out walking the other day and there was a farmer around, and he just stopped me and said, "Oh, where have you been? Where have you been going?" So I told him, and he started giving me the history lesson of the whole area. It was great. And I thought, perfect. It was a nice conversation. So and
does that exist on the railway? With people being so fixated on where they need to go?
It's still like that. It is still like that. But even again during COVID, you had all the key workers going out. They're going to the hospitals or the fire brigade or police, whatever. You would still have those moments where they would stop and have a chat and see how you're getting on. I think most people generally appreciated a quick chat because they've spent maybe days in isolation.
Yeah, got you.
And they want to just they just want to get something off their chest. And you'll get a lot of people. The railway tends to attract, I suppose, people that might fit under the umbrella of vulnerable. They might be vulnerable because maybe they are suffering from mental health issues or whatever. And quite often they come to the stations just to be around and have a chinwag. And have a chinwag. And
be around people.
That's it. And I don't think it's changed.
Belonging. It's like So during COVID, did the trains run full time during COVID? No. So when the first lockdown, it was like the proper lockdown. But when it started to open, what was the atmosphere when they first started to open? People were wearing their masks. Some people weren't wearing their masks because I know it was happening in the local shops. It was happening in local garages. You name it. What was it like on the trains?
Yeah, it was. I suppose
that introduction period of people not really knowing if they should be out. What, they're allowed out, but what to do? It
was challenging because again, you've got obviously at the time people had to wear masks. So
Right, is that still the case?
No.
No.
But you had to wear masks, and how do you enforce that? Because although it might be a law, are you going to go up to somebody and say, you've got to put a mask on?
Did you?
No.
But people used to police themselves,
They did,
right?
yeah, there'd be
It's
arguments
Like
and
you
all
go
sorts.
into a shop and into the garage, you fill up, get in the queue, and where's your mask?
Yeah.
I'm like, why are you wearing a mask? Well, because no one knows your backstory. No one knows nothing. It's like, well, did that cause quite a
It did, yeah.
a chaotic sort of period of time when all your job was to get back up and running, get back to where you were and move on, and that stage must have been difficult, no?
It was, because right at the early days, you weren't able to apply for a lanyard that would say if you were vulnerable, you didn't have to wear a mask. So if somebody was asthmatic, they could wear that to say, well, I can't wear a mask for this reason. So before that, you had people that had genuine reasons not to wear masks being challenged. And when you're in a train, you're on a coach, it's moving through, and you've got people asking you questions that really they don't have any right to ask. It's quite a threatening environment to be in. So you had this element.
That's a good point. It is a threatening environment because people are like, poking your chest really. Why aren't you doing this, or why haven't you got this?
And there's nowhere to go.
Yes, there's nowhere to go.
Where do you go? You're train travelling at 90 miles per hour. Well, what do I do? I've got to sit here and just try and argue, justify why I don't need to wear a mask. So it was a godsend when they brought the lanyards in. It kind of diffused a lot of situations.
It did.
On the flip side...
Visibly,
yeah. On the flip side, you had people using COVID as a means of threatening railway staff. They would say to staff, if you had someone on the train that hadn't paid for a ticket and they got pulled up by it, they'd say, I've got COVID, I'll cough all over you. Right, okay. Thanks.
Smart. No. And I suppose as well with the masks on, you couldn't really identify them. It was like, so they use that excuse, don't come near me, I've got COVID.
Well, they wouldn't have a mask, so they would just be coughing in the hope that you wouldn't come near them.
And what about the 2 meter rule then? How did you guys? Because that must have been tough, right? For you, because every excuse under the sun, like you just said, must have come out. You got these little scallies on there. They're like, don't care, like that. Don't come near me. You're not allowed to come near me.
You can't touch them. You can't do anything. So you have to then make a decision.
How did that pan out?
Well, you have to make a choice. Is it worth the risk? Is it worth the risk, or are they causing not enough disruption that I can kind of just keep an eye on them and just see how it goes? You have to weigh up the risk to yourself. There might be 4, 5, 6 of these individuals. Are you going to put yourself in harm's way just because they're not wearing a mask or because they're not keeping 2 meters distance? Chances are you're going to say no, because it's just not worth it. It's not worth the risk to yourself. It's not worth the risk to other people. You can call the police. You can say we're going to be at next location, meet us there. If the police can turn up, they'll turn up. But again, being in that environment of a coach or of a train, there's very little you can do. You have to judge that. You have to risk assess it yourself and think, is it worth it or not? And it's a really challenging situation for frontline staff. Really hard.
And what do you think the service, the railway service, can do better? If you could, look around with your 16 years of experience and say, right, this could be done better. We could, if we had more funding for this, to stop some of these maybe angry punters coming at you.
Well, part of the challenge is making sure that the service runs as efficiently as possible, and sometimes that challenge is communication between one train operator and another train operator. And I think there are probably far too many train operators.
Okay.
And I think that adds a lot of communication, a lot of middlemen to conversations that don't need to occur. If you went back to sort of pre-World War II, you might only have 7 operators in the whole of the UK. So it makes those conversations a lot easier. You just got to call one person. Like if you go to Clapham Junction, for example, you've got I think 3 different operators that operate at that station, 3 or 4. Anything that happens, you've got to incorporate everybody. So it just makes the conversations quite convoluted and broad. So I'd maybe change that system, maybe get rid of or condense the amount of operators. I think in terms of money, I think Network Rail does its best with the money they've got. Yeah. I genuinely do. I remember years ago we had a landslide and it completely affected all of the lines. And I've never seen a landslide get cleared so quickly. These guys rocked up, they smashed out hundreds of tons and it was gone. They checked the track, everything was safe, and I was like 2 or 3 days. I was seriously impressed with how they did that. So my genuine view of how they do that stuff is impressive. They got the money to do it. They got the skill and the experience to do it. I think where it struggles is getting the information down to the frontline staff. because when something goes wrong, I need information.
Chain
now.
of communication.
Yeah, you need it now, not in 10
Command and
minutes.
control.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you've got punters turning up and they know more than you.
Got you, yeah. I bet they do. And they're
it's
telling you
embarrassing.
your job and you're like, oh, God,
Yeah, it's
you're
embarrassing.
cringing.
Yeah, God, yeah. So that communication, I think it's better if that was improved. It would take a lot of stress and pressure off the frontline staff. If they can know that the information's good, it's reliable, and they can get it out straight away, I think that would really, really help.
And how are you guys since COVID? How are you playing a lot of catch up, or have you kick-started it straight back to where you sort of finished off of before COVID kicked in, or are you guys struggling to play catch up?
No, it's, as far as I'm aware, throughout the country, it's pretty much back to where it was beforehand. It's they're ramping up the services every day. I know some of the operators have got a few operational issues, but that's outside of COVID. That's different. We have every intention in the world just to ramp it back up to encourage people to use the railway again, because it's a good service. It is a good service.
No, it is a good service. Not as reliable as back in the day, but that's just my point of view. But another serious question that I'll throw at you. During the COVID period, during the pandemic, did you see a spike in fatalities? Did you see a spike in violence? Did you see a spike in threatening behaviour because of not only the situation but the conflicting views and opinions of others?
I don't know if it was really a spike, but we certainly became more aware of it, because you couldn't really not become aware of it. There were so few people using the network that whenever you had a vulnerable individual on station, you became aware of it very quickly. And we had a number of individuals that would turn up time and again. So I think what it really was a case of we just had better awareness of vulnerable individuals on the network. And the conversations we were having were always about, well, how do we help this individual out? Because we don't want them turning up threatening suicide. We need to find a way to get them off the network and get them into the right type of help. I think, again, the same with the threatening of the staff. We were just more aware of it because the nature of COVID and the challenges it brought for everybody, it just made you so much more aware of, if I talk to this individual, am I going to be too close? They're not wearing a mask. I can't wear a mask because I've got asthma or something. Or as an employee, a lot of employees, their family members at home might have been under that bracket of vulnerable, so therefore they don't want to take anything home. It created a huge air of tension. So I wouldn't say there was necessarily a spike. We just became incredibly aware of vulnerable individuals or threats of violence against staff because of the nature of COVID and what it presented. But again, what it did do, I think on the flip side, it certainly to me, it felt like it galvanized staff more. We were there more. I remember having specific calls with people. I work with a lot of people that live on their own. And if they can't go out, they can't go and visit friends and family, we would book in calls, video calls with each other at weekends in the evenings. I remember having a video call for 2 hours one evening. We were just sitting there drinking beer and just chatting, but then we were on a video call because we all felt that stress and we all felt that pressure. And if anything, it seemed to bring us all closer together as
absolutely.
an industry.
I get that.
And I liked that. I really enjoyed that. There was so much about COVID, I think, to be positive about in so many different ways and strange ways. And it did things I guess we never really expected. And it introduced me to people that I'd never even spoken to before.
And how did it affect the staff being laid off? And was there sort of the mental health within the organisation? Not external but internal. When all of a sudden the trains just stopped, did it have a huge impact internally?
Mental health wise, we never had any staff that got laid off. We found ways of retaining the staff. You can't stop the services completely. If you stop a service, you mothball the line, which essentially means that when you want to reopen the line, you've got to go through a whole lot of tests and processes to reopen it. So you have to keep the lines running anyway. So we had work for people to do. The challenge was making sure that when people are in the depots or on the trains, they were confident and comfortable that they were being looked after. They've got access to PPE, they've got access to hand sanitisation, and they can go and wash their hands and stuff like that. And part of that problem was, as the NHS experienced, it was getting enough PPE delivered. And we had the same challenges. But once you had it, I think people were generally pretty comfortable. We were also good at, if somebody had to stay home because they have to look after somebody, that's cool, not a problem. Just go and do what you need to do, and the job's still here when you get back. And I think it created again, a very positive approach and a very positive way of managing what could have been a really stressful situation for people being worried about losing jobs and stuff. If they couldn't go and do one role, we found them something else to do. And again, I think as an industry, I think we did that exceptionally well.
That's really refreshing to hear, because normally it's like, that person's been laid off, that person that's had to do this, they're fuming. No, that's really good to hear. And one final question before we go. The future of the National Rail, British Rail, whatever you want to call it. When are we going to see our next bullet train? When are we going to see the futuristic trains like you see going from Dubai to Qatar and in China? When is that going to land in the UK?
Well,
rather than these old chuggedy...
$64 million question. I mean, HS2, I mean, you're better off asking a politician, I think. They'll be able to give you a better answer, perhaps. But sooner the better. I mean, I genuinely enjoy...
Because some trains that just... Now just go from A to B.
Yeah.
You're there within 10, 15, 20 minutes, whatever it may be, rather than jumping on a train, having to get a connection, like it's just like you're being thrown from side to side. Listen, it's not that bad. But I've been abroad, like you said, and I've got some trains, and I'm just like, and it's seamless, and you're there. When's that futuristic sort of material gonna land in the UK?
You get that now. I mean, there are definitely trains out there that would do that. You can go from London up north, and I mean, I travelled down from Manchester down to Euston. I think it was in like 2 hours or an hour and 3/4. No issues whatsoever. You got high speed 1, good service. Yeah. HS2, when it finally comes in, if it finally comes in, it will do the exact same thing. There's a lot of infrastructure to replace, and high speed railways.
That's the thing, isn't it?
Require different infrastructure.
Yeah, it's the infrastructure, because we've had it since, like you said, since World War II. It's a tough one to undo, to rip out, and then just to replace. It doesn't work like that, does it?
No, some of it does, some of it doesn't, and there's a lot of integration that can work just fine. It's high speed infrastructure is completely different, so it's different type of equipment, different type of expertise. Yeah. That's what takes so long sometimes, and it'll get built. I'm sure it will. There's a lot of advantages to having HS2, I think, and I'm a massive advocate for it.
Listen, HS2. Look, you've heard it here first. HS2 is the first time I've heard of it. Listen, Luke, it's been amazing to have you on. Thank you ever so much. And listen, if I see you on the platform one day, you'll get a smile from me, mate. Don't worry. Cheers, mate. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Cheers.